Join us live every Tuesday from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on GluFM for Mind in Your Business with me, Attorney Rishma Eckert, to discuss the law and your business. Email us with your questions at info@mybshow.com. And remember, success comes from Mind in Your Business. Welcome to our Season 2 premiere of Mind in Your Business. I am your host, Rishma Eckert. I'm an attorney at Eckert Law PLLC. And what a premiere we have today. I feel like we leveled up with our guests. And today's all about doing business in Guyana. Now, for those of you who are listening, I always talk about Belize. I am Guyanese born, so I'm also a Guyanese citizen. I attended the University of Guyana where I got my law degree. My first law degree is from the University of Guyana. A lot of my family still lives in Guyana, and I am also on the board of the Guyanese American Chamber of Commerce. So the connection is still there. I enjoyed the dual citizenship with Guyana and Belize, and it's always interesting for me because of business and investments is in my wheelhouse of what I practice, to make sure that we are giving that information to our community, whether it's Belizean, Guyanese, Caribbean. You know, Mark and I were just talking about that we are all one, we're all a community. So what a premiere. I am so looking forward to having a very deep conversation with our very special guest. But before we get to that, as always, a little house cleaning. Thank you so much to our listeners for making our first season a great success. We had overwhelming positive feedback. We had a lot of questions. Thank you for all your calls, your text messages, your follows on our social media, for all your suggestions. Your opinions are valid. They're very well noted. And we are going to continue down this road. This is all for you guys. The point of the show was to create a resource for our community. So keep them coming, guys. We love hearing it. On that note, follow us on our Mind in Your Business Facebook page, and it is at MYB Radio Show. That's the handle for the Facebook page. There we post additional information about the show, and if you go on that page right now, I have uploaded the bios of our very special guests today because they are very long. We have a panel of very accomplished people today, and I didn't want to necessarily take the time of the show to read through everyone's bio. It is just too vast. So please go to our Facebook page where you can check out the bios of our special guests. We still have the Minding Your Business Small Business Spotlight as a segment. And the purpose of that, again, is to highlight small businesses within our communities, especially after the pandemic. We want to give you, our listeners, the opportunity to highlight your businesses and give it a global recognition. We are in Florida, New York, Kentucky, parts of Africa, parts of Asia, Canada, the UK. What am I missing? Pretty much those places. So if you're looking to get your product or your services out there, you want to talk about entrepreneurship, which is my passion, I would love to speak with you. And on that note, I have two individuals, Mark, that I know that I need to give callbacks to. They have expressed an interest in being scheduled for a date to be on the show. I have not forgotten. I'm not dismissing you. I will call you next week and we can schedule a time for you to be on the show to talk about your businesses. So please don't feel that because I haven't called you yet that I'm not going to. It's just been crazy, putting together our season 2. We also have a segment called Ask MYB, where you, our listeners, can go ahead and send in questions to info@mybshow.com. And this is an opportunity to hear directly from you about the topics that affect you and your business, topics that you would like for me to cover. So we've gotten in the past questions, an expansion of something that I may have covered already, or we've also gotten questions where, for example, licensing, I didn't cover that in our first season, and I got a question about that, and I figured, well, let's just make an entire show about it. So that is your opportunity to give me some feedback and to ask questions that you would like for me to cover in this program. Like every episode, I'm going to start this one with a quote of the week. And this quote is from Henry Ford. And he says, "Coming together is a beginning. Staying together is progress. And working together is success." And I absolutely love that quote because it is true. yes, you can always start an initiative, but really that collaboration is the key to the success. And I see that with the Caribbean countries, and I see that with businesses as well. So that is our show today is the spirit of collaboration and hearing about the opportunities in Guyana. So to our segment, to our content, I'm very excited today to introduce our very special guest to discuss the topic of doing business in Guyana. Representing the public sector is Mr. Robert M. Persaud, who is the Foreign Secretary for the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Guyana. Welcome to our show, Mr. Persaud.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And representing the private sector is Mr. Komal Samaroo, who is the chairman of the board, amongst many other things. I'll just stick to chairman of the board of Demerara Distillers Limited, DDL. If you don't know what that is, you're missing out on El Dorado rum. And I feel sorry for you because it is definitely something that you want to make sure you experience. And I had this, Mr. Samaroo, I had this discussion with Wesley, and we were going back and forth in Belizean rum versus Guyanese rum. And he told me, oh, no. I have to reacquaint you with some El Dorado for you to understand the difference. So I'm a fan of your product for sure. So welcome to the show, Mr. Samaroo.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. And I have to say thank you so much to former Ambassador Wesley Curtin for making this happen. I think it's a great way to highlight the Guyanese community that's in South Florida and everywhere else that I mentioned in the world. So I'll just get straight to the questions because I can just imagine that you two will have a lot to say. So my first question is, what is your opinion of the ease of doing business in Guyana? And what would you identify as some barriers to doing business within Guyana? I'll start with you, Mr. Persaud.
Well, thank you very much to Mr. Samaroo, Mr. Christian, and yourself. I haven't had the opportunity to have interacted with you, Ms. Eckert and Mr. Christian, but certainly it's a pleasure being here. Myself and Komal, we go back a long way, having been in government and serving in different portfolio. And I know he has done great things, not only for his company, but also for the country in terms of putting Guyanese products on the world stage and expanding and growing Demerara Distillers Limited and all the subsidiaries. So I'm very happy to be sharing this panel with him. You know, you've asked an interesting question. What are some of I would want to say some of the irritants of doing business. And firstly, we need to understand the context of our country. We're a country that is developing. We're a country that has had some very difficult patches in our history. We're a country where we've experimented with things. Take, for instance, our experiment with socialism, then corporatism, and then there was that determined effort in the early 90s to bring back in, as it were, the private sector at the forefront. And since then, especially from the period 1992 to 2015, we've seen a consistent effort to build an entrepreneurial class, to really make the private sector the engine of growth, to make it easy to do business and to create opportunities. And then we had that disruption from 2015 to 2020, where we saw a reversal of some of those moves in terms of how to position the private sector to make the public sector much more efficient in terms of facilitating business activities in a very broad way. Luckily, and notwithstanding the challenges we've had after the elections in 2020, we are back on course. And we're back on course with a very determined focus that is to ensure that persons and companies and individuals, and particularly Guyanese, who want to engage in business activities, they can do so freely. They can believe that no matter what background they come from or what area they come from, that there is equity in terms of access, equity in terms of opportunities. And so that has been a broad thrust. And the president has made it quite clear to both all government agencies and ministries that we must identify areas in which persons might be facing irritants or sloth or inefficiencies and have those addressed and corrected. And one of his primary focus is in creating what we call a single window system, whereby rather than you have to run to 12 different agencies to get things done, you have the opportunity to go to one agency and develop and have the system so developed that it avoids the wait, it avoids delay, it avoids frustration, and it allows businesses to focus on what they do best, and that is to get their business going rather than to be encumbered or, as it were, to be delayed or to derail by some inefficiency of some bureaucrat or some system that we would have inherited, for decades, and which we have not been able to fix and to correct. And so, in giving you that perspective, is that just a point that it is a priority. That is, let us look in terms of making business, in terms of doing business easier, much more efficient, much more effective, for the good of the country as a whole. Because if there's wealth, then every one of us will have the opportunity to enjoy prosperity. If businesses do well, if the public sector is efficient, I think it all comes together in a very good way and in a very focused way. They're different, now coming back specifically to your question, different groupings, be it the private sector or even some external groupings, have identified a number of broad areas. Persons have talked in terms of, the process to register, some concerns in terms of legal issues that there is. Thirdly, in understanding the bureaucracy, how it is that we can, get around and get things done. Fourth has been the issue of slothfulness in terms of response. Applications are made or contacts are made with agency, there's slothfulness in dealing with that. And all these have been carefully addressed, and there is currently work being done by the Ministry of Tourism, Industry, Commerce, specifically on this particular issue. That is highlighting what those areas are and working conscientiously in an interagency way, in a collaborative way, in the wider sphere of government, both in terms of government ministries, but also you have a number of statutory agencies that are within the remit of government. The issue with the courts and other matters, that is outside, because we have separation of power, and government can't tell the court, well, it needs to do X, Y, or Z. But the aim is, and I'm quite sure if the judiciary itself is captured by that, also that reality, that it too can contribute to society moving forward and businesses being allowed to conduct their activities in a seamless way. I think with that coordinated and that determined effort, many of those issues that I highlighted and others will certainly be able to be addressed, and so that persons locally and externally who want to do business in Guyana can feel comfortable, but also an important element too, that they can also believe that whatever activity that they are engaged in will be respected by law, respected by our institutions, and not, as it were, leave to the vagaries of any individual or some bureaucracy, but rather they can feel safe and secure too with the business and the type of activities that they are engaged in. So from the outset, I would flag those are some points for consideration.
The irritants, as you call it. Very, very well said. And I really like that idea of single window being proposed. What is the status on that? Are you working on it now? Does it already exist? Is there somewhere that someone who wants to invest in Guyana can now say, okay, let me email this person or go to this website or engage in a certain way to get the ball rolling on opening businesses in Guyana?
Simply put, it is work in progress, because we will also have to update some of the regulations and some of our laws to make it happen, especially in terms of doing a lot of the transactions online. And then you have to bring a number of agencies, statutory agencies, whereby you have convergence. Right now, you have a particular agency, they do their work, another agency does its work, but there's no
communication. Yes,
yeah, there's communication, but how do you have convergence with the system to give you? So we started to work on those. So it's work in progress. And certainly members of the business community and the wider society, including yourselves, will be updated on this. But I'm quite sure the Minister, Onesh Waldron, and her team at the Ministry of Tourism, Industry, Commerce, and they themselves will be in Miami in a few days, as well as
That's right.
other parts of the US. And she'll be able, and her team will be able to expand and to certainly interact and interface on this particular issue in a much more in-depth way.
Thank you. And I do really like that initiative, because that is the number one concern, or number one complaint, I should say, that I get from international business owners, whether they're going to Guyana or Belize or South America or whatever the case may be. There's not a hub. There's not a central place that they can go and say, okay, I want to open a business. How do I do that? What are the government agencies that need to be involved? So this is very good, very forward thinking. And I think it's going to attract a lot of investors to Guyana versus other countries that they currently experience a lot of these difficulties. Mr. Samaroo, I can't wait to hear your private sector perspective on the ease of doing business in Guyana.
Yeah, well, I bring a perspective that goes back to a long time. Robert has just given a very good perspective of how macroeconomic policies evolved over time. From the state owning and controlling the commanding heights to now advocacy for the private sector being the engine of growth. So I will say that now more than ever before, it is much easier to get your business registered, to get approvals when it becomes necessary. It is true that there is a massive need to modernize the way governments serve its community. And therefore, I think in time, I hope that we can have much more online services that are delivered by the government to people. So you, instead of going to an office and queue up, you could go online and register your interest or put your application in, and you know that digital footprint is there. It is traceable at all times, and it is processed through the normal course of time. I think that will bring tremendous efficiency and make it much, much easier to do business. But I recognize that we have legacy issues that we need to deal with, and it will take time before we can get to that stage. But my sense is that there's a willingness and an understanding and an appreciation of the direction in which we need to go. So while it may not be perfect, I think we are moving in the right direction.
Right. And thank you. And I want to say too that even though the system is being worked on and it's not currently in place, it doesn't mean that you can't do the things that Minister Persaud is saying. Exactly. You can still set up a business, but they're just working on a way to make it more efficient, to make it centralized and less of pain to do. So you can still go ahead and set up your businesses. And is there an agency, Mr. Persaud, that they can go to with that help? So for example, in Florida, we have the Division of Corporations of the state of Florida, that if there's an issue with incorporation or you have questions, you can go ahead and ask. I'm pretty sure Guyana has a similar system. I'm just not familiar with what that is.
Well, we have a different type of legal system, as it were, in terms of incorporation and how it is that we set up our business. But the simple advice would be for persons to get in contact with the Guyana Office for Investment. They will then guide you and facilitate you. I also know that there is a grouping, even in the Guyanese diaspora, have set up a mechanism whereby you can also fully do it online and get the service be provided via a legal firm in Guyana also. But my advice would be to be your first point of contact or your first stop, and we hopefully will, your last stop too, will be the Guyana Office for Investment. So they can, because the whole intention of Go Invest was to be a one-stop shop. But certain things and more things have to come together as we're working towards to make that happen. But Go Invest is the place that you should start.
Great. And I think that that's sort of the information that we want to get out there so people know where to go to. Because Guyana, like every other Caribbean country that I've either lived in or visited, you always have someone that's like, yeah, I'm going to help you. Yeah, I can do that for you. Yeah, just pay me, 500 Guyanese, not even Guyanese, $500 US, and I can get this thing for you. I had an incident where one of my aunts was trying to get something out of Guyana. And she said, I met this guy and he works for a bank and he said he can do it for me for $500 US. And I told her, please do not pay this person. Whoever it is, I don't know who he is. I don't know what his position is in that bank. but do not, because there's no way that should cost that much to get done. So there's that element of not knowing who to trust, where to go to get the correct information. And that's also one of the reasons that we started the Guyanese American Chamber of Commerce, that Wesley started the Guyanese American Chamber, because you now have this, again, a hub that you can at least ask information. We can point you in the correct direction. So if you're in Florida, please go ahead and reach out to the Guyanese American Chamber. We will at least put you on the right path to the office of the investment that you're speaking about, so that you can have the right persons to deal with, and not someone who's going to say, yeah, I can do it. Because you'll meet those. There's a dime a dozen in Guyana. We'll help you. It just has, you gotta pay up for that help. So we want to make sure that you're streamlined with your business, and nothing frustrates a business owner more, especially a foreign business owner, because we're so used in Florida, everything 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We're used to getting things done very quickly, and nothing frustrates you more than being put through the ringer to get something done. So I really applaud that one window system. I like it a lot. Both gentlemen, you spoke about a large degree of overlap between the private and the public sector. So let's talk a little bit about that. Do you think that there's a fair amount of overlap still, or do you think it's mostly autonomous? So for example, if you're opening a business, do I have to deal with the government a lot besides the incorporation and the licensing? Is there a fair amount of overlap that has to be done with the public and private sectors?
I think it will depend on the business you're getting into.
Okay.
You could start a business, incorporate, purchase private property, set up your factory. There's really no approval apart from if it's manufacturing food and drug regulation, but in terms of gone are the days of import license approval. Once upon a time we needed that. Or US dollars are traded openly at the commercial bank. You don't have currency restrictions, although you still do have that in some Caribbean territories. In Guyana, it's very open. So you can start your business without interacting with any government office, I would say. Obviously, there's some businesses that would require governmental approval. In that case, you will have to go to the particular government office. So I think it is fairly clear that you can start a business without interfacing with the government if the business does not require any government approval.
Yeah,
fair enough, Mr. Persaud.
I think that is a very accurate, and I wanted Mr. Samaroo himself to say that. Our aim is to leave the private sector to do what it does best. We're enablers of business. We're here to ensure that the right framework, right conditions is set in place. We have the right macroeconomic policy, and let us allow the private sector and businesses to do what they do best. We're about creating wealth. We want to create prosperity. We want to create equity. We want to ensure that there's diversity in terms of access and opportunities. And so we just have to set the policies in place. But how a business conducts itself, once it's within the confines of the law, that's up to the business. And, the thing of the days where businesses have to go to ministers' offices or permanent secretaries, we want to move away, and we have been moving away from that. We don't want to be obstacles. We don't want to, as it were, to be hindrance, but rather to allow that to take place. And we've seen it in many instances, whether it's in the financial sector, whether it's in the services sector, whether it's in the construction sector, and the new sectors of the economy that we see coming up, the oil and gas sector. The role of government is to be kept at a minimum, but we want the private sector to succeed. And when we can have partnership with the private sector, and that is a new chapter that we're trying to do. PPP, not the People's Progressive Party, but public-private
Partnerships, correct.
Yeah, is something that we have been pushing a lot on. So rather than us getting in front of the private sector, we want to work with the private sector so that we can have, as it were, exponential growth, that we can build the type of infrastructure that government alone can build, no private capital alone can build. But whether they're coming together, we can then have that type of relationship whereby it becomes a win-win for both public and private, but for the country as a whole.
A win-win-win. Everyone wins. Yes, I'm glad you said that, because that's sort of the direction that I was hoping that you would say, to have the private companies be autonomous to an extent, right? So you still need government intervention or approval for certain things, but it's mostly hands off. You're able to run your company the way that you would run any company without having excessive, maybe that's the word I should have used, excessive government intervention. And I like that, because you're right. There are certain PPP, public-private partnerships, that have to be done. And, you know, when you have huge projects and you're looking to joint venture with someone, for example, that's fine. But I just wanted to, again, highlight that Guyana is not a place where you will go and you have to, you know, do your monthly reports to some government agency who's going to come and be over your shoulder, just shadowing you everything that you do. You have that autonomy to run your business the way that you do. And I think that in a lot of like countries like the US and the UK, business owners are spoiled. I'm going to say that as a business law attorney. Business owners and entrepreneurs they're spoiled because they're allowed this autonomy, this free market. They're allowed to, not illegal activity or anything like that, but they're allowed, for the most part, to run their businesses without a lot of government intervention. So the expectation is there as well when they translate that business to the Caribbean communities. And some countries, they're surprised of all the government intervention. So I'm glad that you're able to articulate that on behalf of Guyana, because I see that moving in a place that's, I see the investments are moving in a place, and business is moving in a place that's really positive for foreign investors and even local investors. Which, Mark, do we have any questions from any of our listeners at this point?
Not right now.
Not as yet. Okay, great. So I'm going to move on. How would you, and this is for both of you, how would you describe the current investment climate in Guyana? And maybe I can start with you, Mr. Persaud. And the second part of that question is that, do you believe that did the current investment climate become better or worse by the pandemic? So what is the current climate, and do you believe that it became better or worse by the pandemic?
Well, I think undoubtedly it's favorable, and notwithstanding the constraints and the restraints that have imposed upon how people do business, how government operate, how people, the population itself, conduct itself, we've still seen that determine and that increased interest in Guyana. So much so that, we've had on a weekly basis missions and teams coming, especially since there have been some relaxation of the guidelines, not only here, but elsewhere, in terms of travel. Once we've satisfied the necessary condition, we've had teams coming on a weekly basis, seeking out opportunities, looking for new areas, not only in oil and gas, but be it in agriculture, be it in the services sector, the construction sector, the tourism sector. So all across the spectrum of opportunities, we've seen that increased interest. And once people have determined that it makes sense to do business, I think they then take the next logical steps, as it were. So, our investment climate here, I think, is excellent. And certainly, notwithstanding some of the issues that we may flag as what we need to fix or do better, I think it'll still put us way ahead of some other places. In the context of the pandemic, the way in which our government, particularly the president, has been focused in ensuring that, one, that we, in a way, do not allow this to push us back too much, although the world itself, in terms of the world economy, has suffered. Many countries have seen a decimation of their economies. Take, for instance, the Caribbean with what the impact on tourism, and it has had, in Guyana's case, we've tried to minimize that by ensuring that we have the right policies, ensuring that we continue to support and spur economic growth and economic activities, that we provide support to vulnerable and affected groups, be it the elderly, be it persons who would have needs, be it persons who would have lost income. And so in managing things in a way that we don't have too much of a severe fallout, so that it will affect, as it were, the investment climate, or as it were, the big picture things, so that once we're able to rebound and overcome the big constraints of the pandemic, it would put us in good stead. So it is how we've been able to navigate the pandemic and minimizing and ensuring that does not, as it were, hold us back too much in many regards.
Was there a small business entrepreneur relief within the way that the pandemic was being handled? Is there a section for that? Because I know a lot of developing countries, Belize included, focused a lot on food assistance, a lot on just the basic necessities, but not necessarily on small business recuperation of income. Was Guyana able to provide for their small businesses some sort of pandemic relief? Well,
we also provided for, as I said, vulnerable sections of the population, school children in terms of grants, have a special grant for pensioners, persons who would have been laid off, to ensure that they have some means of sustenance. Also, we target in terms of providing relief. Mr. Samaroo is in the banking sector. He will tell you that there was some relief to have provided for the business community. And I'm sure many small businesses would have been able to benefit and tap into that. So some of those policies were directly and indirectly targeted individuals, small businesses, and even larger companies in that regard. There's also a program, a small business window facility, where we've been able to support new businesses as well as existing businesses who would have been affected. So yes, we've tried to be across the board in terms of providing that type of support and relief in this, as it were, as we navigate, struggle, and try to emerge from the vices that have been created by the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's before I want to ask you specifically about oil and gas. Before I do that, I do want to get Mr. Samaroo's take on the current climate of investment, and if the pandemic made it better or worse from a private sector point of view.
Right. Well, historically, I mean, Guyana was looked at as a low-income economy, and therefore, automatically, people thought that the opportunities there are quite limited. Spending power is quite small on a per capita basis, and room for investment was not very, very attractive. What the oil and gas sector has done now is to open up Guyana as a country where the per capita income will grow, where the economic space is expanding, and where there are more opportunities now in every sector. In the traditional sector, there are more opportunities because there are more spending power. In infrastructure, there is likely to be much more resources available to rehabilitate and build the infrastructure of the country. And then in the oil and gas sector, where there's a whole new set of skill sets that are required. So there are multiple areas of new opportunities that exist now that maybe did not exist 4 or 5 years ago. And that is why I'm saying that it is a country with limitless business prospects. It's a country where the income curve is rising, and where the economic space available for businesses to operate is expanding quite significantly, even if I may say exponentially. So it is for perceptive business people to identify the opportunities where they are interested in. The other thing that will happen also, I believe, is that in the technology sector, because technology has been driving transformation around the world, and here is a country that will have spending power and that will be modernizing, bypassing all the development that took place between the mechanical age and the digital age, and now coming right up to today's technology. So it presents an opportunity for modernization at a rate that is not quite common in the world. And I think that's the opportunity to Ghana present. Obviously, I recognize we're a small country, less than 1 million people, And so the scale on which you can do things is also limited. But I believe that it is a good time for investment. Investment climate is right. I think that the pandemic has also forced us to look at things. I mean, a couple of years ago, we would not have been using Zoom, and Zoom has risen now where it has become part of our day-to-day life, you know. And there are several other areas where technology has been adopted increasingly in businesses in Guyana as they move to modernize and bring their business practice in line with the rest of the world. So while all of this is taking place, there are dramatic changes and I think significant opportunities for a wide range of businesses that I certainly think the diaspora would be interested in.
That's a great answer, because when I think of Guyana in the past, especially when I used to go to UG, we're talking 2003-ish is when I started the LLB program. Gold was the thing. Nothing could beat Guyana gold. You know, everyone wanted Guyanese gold miners, the gold makers. I still have, or my family, I should say, we still have and really cherish the Guyana gold that we have. That was the industry to beat. And now I don't hear anyone talking about gold within Guyana. And maybe, you know, you gentlemen can correct me, but that's not the talk anymore. It's oil and gas. Most of the people who have approached me who know that I'm Guyanese and affiliated with the chamber, it's all talk about oil and gas. It's nothing else. And again, Guyana has a robust agriculture industry as well. No one is coming to me asking me about what about that rice, or what about, you know, the other types of industries. It's always oil and gas. So do you see that? And again, this is a question for both of you. Do you see the oil and gas industry overtaking what Guyana has traditionally been known for in terms of not necessarily just the prosperity of it, but just in terms of what the country is going to be projected to become? Mr. Persaud, if you want to take that first.
What we sought to do is that whilst we have the emergence of oil and gas, we've made it quite clear as in terms of our vision and our thrust moving forward, is that we also want the other sectors of the economy to grow. We also want investment in those sectors, be it in agriculture. And Mr. Samaroo will tell you, he's just commissioned and expanded his juice processing facility there, and that certainly will support some of the activities taking place in agriculture. The president has just commissioned a huge area whereby we will be self-sufficient in corn and soya to provide feed for our poultry sector. As an example, we've talked about the revitalization of sugar. Our rice production area is expanding, and with energy, we want to move down in value added. We're looking in terms of removing all the barriers within the region so that we can export more, and that is a focused government policy. Mining itself, so when we came into office, we found that the miners themselves had to be paying huge taxes for equipment and for other services and inputs that we require. We removed that. And yes, gold is still an important sector of the economy, but there are new things. So in Guyana now is not a story anymore of rice and sugar. It's not only the story of gold and bauxite. It's not only the story only of forestry. But today we can talk about Guyana being a story now of developing an ICT sector. We've seen huge investments being made by the private sector in taking cable, not the big telephone company, but a small emerging company itself, have taken the bold step of running a cable into the Esquire area, which was not served. Then they ran a cable also up to Linden so that we can have call centers in other parts of the country and create that whole sector and create, as it were, also our little Silicon Valley or our smart cities. The president has a vision to have a number of smart cities set up too, in addition to building a new city, Silicon City on the Linden-Suzac Highway. So the tourism sector too, the government has been given incentives and has already received a number of proposals to build 5-star hotels in different areas. So it has not been one in which we have been, as it were, fixated only on the potential of oil and gas and services there. And that's a big sector. You'll have close to $40 billion of investment coming in the next few years. And that's only for the capital expenditure that is needed offshore. But with that will come another $40 billion of investment or opportunities to supply and to provide services that will have to go along with there. So it's a wide range of, so whilst persons may be talking about oil and gas in country. And if you move around in Guyana and you listen to government and the private sector, it is also looking at those new areas, those other areas. We don't want our economy to be based on oil and gas. We want the non-oil and gas sector to also to be strong, to be dominant, and rather to utilize the opportunities that oil and gas would afford us so that we can build and cushion and ensure that for legacy's sake, even beyond oil and gas, these other sectors will continue to contribute to the development of our country.
Great answer, because not everyone can contribute with oil and gas. Not everyone is Exxon, right? So we still have to have opportunities for others as well. Mr. Samaroo, do you want to add? Because
Yes,
I have follow-up questions.
No, I think when one thinks that we are moving from a zero in the oil and gas sector, you will see exponential growth in that sector inevitably. And it dominates the discourse because it's a whole new set of businesses that come in to support that sector. But I think what the oil and gas sector does is to allow the other sectors the opportunity of developing even faster than they were going. So they're now on a faster trajectory than they were prior to oil and gas. Okay, so we are on both tracks where the traditional sectors are growing at a faster rate, while the oil and gas as a new emerging sector is contributing the resources to help the overall growth of the economy.
That's right, because as one of my colleagues would say, a rising tide lifts all boats. So when you have the influx of resources and money from oil and gas, of course, you can channel that into re-education, as you mentioned before, training, how to even deal with the oil and gas industry. I didn't know the Guyana had call centers. That's new for me that you mentioned call centers. I didn't even know that. But of course they would, because we're English speaking. There's not a retraining in terms of language barriers. It's perfect. That's great. Which leads me into my other question. I do want to talk a little bit more about oil and gas, but I don't think I have time. So we can always follow up at our Doing Business with Guyana. So I will talk about that later too. I want to segue what you guys just said into a very important question that I've been asked, again, as business law attorney here. Is there, in the investment opportunities that are available, it tends to be segmented. So you have the locals the local Guyanese people who can access certain opportunities, but some seem to be geared more towards foreign companies. Now, I want both of you, if you can just speak towards the investment opportunities. Is it targeted to certain demographics? Is it open for all? How, especially Mr. Persaud, how does the government make that sort of distinction?
Well, first of all, we have to look what the policies are. And if you study government policies, you would see that it creates an equal playing field. We recognize there's a role for private foreign capital, as well as we recognize that there's also a role for local private capital. And one of the new policies that will be adumbrated very soon will be a focused effort on local content. That is ensuring that more Guyanese are allowed and are given the space to play a role in the emerging sectors. We don't have the issues of local content in the traditional sectors, as it were. But in the new emerging sector, because we're starting from zero as an oil and gas player, and we did not have that capacity. We did not have that knowledge. We did not have that experience. But at the same time, we do not want, as it were, to be run over, whereby we will not be given the space or the opportunity to grow and be able to develop, as it were, that capacity. And so there'll be a deliberate government policy soon to be adumbrated, that is our local content policy and associated legislation that will allow us on that particular area. But there is, Guyana, we always say that we're open for investment, and we are open for investment. We encourage local investors. We try to work with local companies in various ways. If you look at our policies, just recently, there have been some restrictions that were previously in place for contractors. What we've done is remove those restrictions where it becomes less burdensome for local contractors, small contractors, to get involved and to play a part. Because in that case, what you've done with the requirements, you would have more or less kept them out. And then we've had a situation whereby only some with a certain means would be able to come, or whether you're external. So we've tried to create an even-handed policy. We have absolutely nothing. We don't see anything wrong with private foreign capital once they can, they abide by our national laws, our regulations, and culture of our country. Once that is respected, we have a very open door in that regard. But at the same time, we are not going to allow our local players to be squeezed out, also exactly. and not be given space to grow and to expand at the same time. So it is that balancing act, that careful balancing act, that you can see very clearly through government's policy. And if you listen to the budgets, and if you look at the sectoral policy, statements by the president, and even when we'll have a revised low carbon development strategy re-articulated, you will also see some of that coming to the fore. But I've just pointed to just some elements, but it's much broader and much more in-depth than that.
Exactly, because you don't want the foreign entities that considerably may have more capital to come in, underbid or undercut local Guyanese that can go ahead and provide similar services. So for example, in your bidding processes, I can imagine you have something like, tell me how much employment opportunities that you're going to have, or are you going to partner with local Guyanese companies to be able to have your incorporation expedited, for example, or something like that. So it's I wanted to also, even though I'm calling from Florida and I'm outside of Guyana, I wanted local Guyanese to see that there is an opportunity for them to invest in their own country, especially those who still live there, those in the diaspora like myself, that there is an opportunity to do so. And before I ask Mr. Samaroo for his opinion, is there somewhere that local Guyanese can go to see what's available? So maybe this is a question for Mr. Samaroo. So for example, if UG wants to open has another building that they're building and they're looking to raise capital, is there somewhere that we can go in the diaspora or the local Guyanese can go and see the projects that are available to determine whether or not we want to engage?
Maybe Robert might be able to answer that question more, because there's a diaspora unit at the Foreign Affairs Ministry.
Yes, we have just, in fact, over the last year, we've made it also as part of a policy of engaging the diaspora. We've created for the first time a diaspora unit with dedicated resources, and we're now setting up point persons in different parts where the Guyanese community operate. And just as we are speaking very soon, in a few minutes, we're running a week-long series whereby we have investment webinars. Last night we had the heads of Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission and the Central Housing Planning Authority. We have the Go Invest, Guyana Revenue Authority. We engage with the private sector. So we're using these webinars as outlets, or as we want to say, windows that people can see what is there, what are the opportunities, and some of the basic questions they may have. They don't have to speak to X, Y, or Z or any random. We're putting you in direct contact with the heads of those agencies, because we believe in transparency. We also want persons to be accountable, but persons also have to recognize who their servants to. And we consider the global diaspora too as part and an important component. So we have those facilities, those vehicles, those windows by which opportunities can be identified, and also you're guided as to how you can do that. And that's why we decided to accept the invitation by the Guyanese American Chamber of Commerce, where you have high-level participation from the Prime Minister, Ministers Kroll, Teixeira, Onik Waldron, will be coming up there to have direct interaction. It shows the seriousness, but also it shows the commitment we have to engaging and explaining and outlining the opportunities there are.
Yes, and Mr. Samaroo, from the private sector, do you see that there is do you see a lot of local Guyanese wanting to reinvest into their country?
Well, first of all, I want to say that in all that I do, I'm extremely committed to building Guyanese-owned businesses. Okay, apart from DL, which I think is a really great model, my association with the Institute of Private Enterprise Development is to encourage local people at the micro and small level to get into business and to support them. And through my involvement with the banking sector, to open up opportunities for small, medium, and large businesses. So I'm dedicating my energy, so to speak, on really giving a push to Guyanese business, because I believe that it is important to build local businesses, a local equity base, if the country is to have sustainable development into the future, right? And I do believe that the diaspora community also should have the confidence of in the future of the country to be part of that development and growth. So while I agree that no country can close itself off from businesses outside of that country, it is necessary to get access to new ideas, new capital, new ways of doing things. But when the business sector is dominated by external businesses, then you will not have the level of sustainability going forward, because capital moves depending on where the opportunities are best.
That's
you can have all kinds of economic instability. So having a local, strong business base is, in my view, key for the long-term development of Guyana. And that is where I'm committing my energy, and make a contribution as much as I can. So I also believe that local businesses entering into strategic relationships with external businesses where we can learn to do things better and bring new technology and know-how. Right now, for example, we are engaged as we look at development of the dairy sector in a joint venture arrangement with an Israeli company that has perfected, has got the world's best practices in how you get the highest yield from a dairy herd, for example, and what are the best practices. So we can learn from that, and our other private farmers can also learn from that. So it has to be a mix of strong locally based businesses partnering strategically with external business, as well as international business coming and investing in the country. It has to be a mix, a judicious mix there that benefits everybody.
And a very, very careful mix. And I like everything that you just said, because you're absolutely right. Foreign investors will go where the best opportunity is. So if you are going to be, from the people who approach me, they're looking for the best opportunity, because again, their focus is making the best profit. Their focus is not reinvesting in the country that's their homeland. So I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying it's a different focus. And exactly right. So if a local Guyanese says, you know what, I have a little extra cash, I want to reinvest, I want to have equity in a company, where do they go to though? That's what I'm asking. Like for myself, if me and my family say, you know what, I don't want to necessarily buy a house in Ghana because I'm not going to live there. What industries can I go right now and find? I can't do oil and gas because it's out of my wheelhouse completely, not interested. And, if I wanted to go and find a project that I can really have my grips in, where could I go now? Go invest probably, right?
Well, it's at the end of the day, we've looked at various vehicles to have this type of intervention or as it were, participation you talk about. One of which the government was exploring to set up a bond whereby members of the diaspora could invest in, and the bond would then be utilized for the purposes of huge, large-scale projects. So that's one vehicle that can be looked at. Sometimes it also, you may want to partner with an existing company in Ghana, and I've always promoted that. Members of the diaspora or even Guyanese investors who do not reside in Ghana, who do not domicile in Ghana, we want to look at working with another company that is already here, another Guyanese company, a sister Guyanese company, once it fits in within your model. But that is why, the pandemic has put some constraints, but that's why it is important that we have local expos. When these expos are held, persons are able to come visit. There are working sessions where they're able to enter into agreements, deals, or even explore partnerships as such. We try to do a lot of these things virtually now, but certainly the opportunity will present itself soon where we will have an in-person expo where people can come themselves and do. But I've always advised, seek out the opportunity that fits well into your model. Look in terms of partnering. Get the best advice. Government is not here to say you must invest your money in X or don't invest it in Y. Invest it in this particular area. That's not our role. Our role is to say these are the range of opportunities. This is how you can do business in Guyana. You make that choice, because if you succeed, we're all happy. If you don't succeed, government at the end of the day, we get the blame for that. So we rather let the entrepreneurial skills come out, or the acumen of those who are seeking to invest, let that come out in the identification. But we're just there to open doors.
To facilitate, as you said.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you want to walk through, you walk through. But you do that based on your own business model.
I really like the idea of the bonds. I do. Because maybe there's not a project that you're necessarily interested in.
Just looking for a rate of return and contributing.
Exactly. Maybe there's nothing that's attractive for that particular person that's going to, a lot of investments. If you're in it, that is not your wheelhouse, or you're in it and it's not your day job to do investments. A lot of it is a passion project, right? You invest on what you're passionate about. So I really like that idea of the bonds. Mr. Samaroo, do you want to add anything else? We're getting down to the wire, and I do need to do my wrap up, but I want to give you guys an opportunity to say the last word. Yes, Mark.
Yes,
and I also think there are opportunities for people to invest. There is a few public companies, for example. I just realized that in DDL, for example, we have over 1,000 members of the diaspora who are still shareholders of our company. So they have a little piece, and that gives them an emotional connection. They are institutions like the Guyana Unit Trust, administered by the Trust Company Guyana. People go there and they buy units, and those units are invested in shares locally that are available. So there are some small opportunities, but I think in the future, these are opportunities, I'm sure, that will be expanded as the demand is seen by the authorities.
Indeed. Mark?
And we also have the Guyana Stock Exchange, whereby persons themselves can go and participate in that.
Very, very impressive. Very impressive that you have a stock exchange. Not every Caribbean country has that. Not even, a lot of Latin American countries don't have that as well. So that's very impressive that you have a stock exchange. I know that Belize is currently trying to work on getting one. We don't have that either. So that is very impressive that you have a stock exchange. Mark, did you have a question?
Actually, I was going to say, we could continue because this information was potent, good, great.
Oh, okay. I can continue. Well, I don't want to take out, I told the gentleman 4 to 5, so I don't want to, go beyond that as well. And besides, if you want to hear more from these very knowledgeable, very thorough, I'm very impressed by all the answers. Gentlemen, we do have a Doing Business with Guyana event this Thursday. It's an all-day event. It's hosted by the Guyanese American Chamber of Commerce. It is a closed event. We had to cap it due to capacity, COVID, all these things. We capped it, but it will be live streamed. The entire event is going to be live streamed on the Guyanese American Chamber of Commerce Facebook page. So if you want to still participate, hear more of what these gentlemen have to say, you can go to the Guyanese American Chamber of Commerce Facebook page, like the page, and you will see the live stream from the day's events. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be an entire day of talking about exactly what we're talking about now. Investment opportunities. It's going to be broken down by segments. It's going to be a more thorough discussion. So this is sort of like a little appetizer for our events on Thursday. I'll give you guys the last word before my wrap up, and I very much look forward to meeting you guys in person on Thursday. So if you have any last thoughts or comments that you want to say, please go ahead and do so. Mr. Persaud.
If I may take the first jump on this.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
If members of the diaspora are looking to invest in Guyana, this is the time, this is the opportunity. Get on board early. I don't think you've had it. The opportunity has been as good as this. And, you need to make use of this opportunity now, okay? Because with the passage of time, it will not be as positive as it is at this point in time.
Thank you.
Building on what Mrs. Samaroo said, is absolutely correct. We're at a very important juncture in our country, and the opportunities is here for us to take. And I think we should be focused. We should be much more united. We should all see this as being part of our, as it were, our day, our time, as such. And if we don't do it, someone else will. And now is the time for us to do it. And that is why we're going as a way in overdrive in ensuring that people have access, ensuring that people are aware, ensuring that we explain the mechanisms. There's so much we can do. Now is the time for all to get on board, all Guyanese, whether you live in Guyana, because I'm quite sure people living in Guyana are seeing this too, you're not excluded, but also if you Guyanese living abroad, now is the time to get on board. It is your country, it is your future, and it is ours to build together for common prosperity.
Well said. I can't say it any better than that because you're absolutely right. No one is going to be more interested in your country than you are. And that's the bottom line, no matter where you live. I talk about my dual citizenship, Guyana and Belize, and no one is going to be more interested in that country. And even I'm married to a non-Caribbean person. And the other day he talks about, oh, I'm so nostalgic. I said, nostalgic about what? You didn't grow up in any of these countries. He was talking about being nostalgic of traveling to Belize. And I go, how are you? How is it possible that you're nostalgic? I'm the one that should be nostalgic. But you don't want, I mean, it's nice, but at the same time, it doesn't have the same feel, right? Like, you know, you have foreigners coming in and loving your country more than you. No, your passion has to be there. And Mr. Samaroo, I think I found my passion project, shares in that rum company. I think maybe that's what it's going to be. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Wealth of knowledge. I greatly look forward to meeting you on Thursday. Actually, Wednesday night. I'll see you Wednesday night for the reception. I'll do my wrap up now, Mark, because I have to let these gentlemen go. I cannot hold them hostage anymore. My bottom line is to thank you. I really appreciate it.
And do enjoy.
Stay abreast of the climate and the opportunities are available. And I love everything that Mr. Persaud has to say about the single window, the one window approach. If you're really interested, find that opportunity, like Mr. Samaroo says, to go ahead and make your investment now. It's going to pay off it's going to pay off. Because once you have the foreign investors come in, it just drives everything up. I mean, that's just how the economy goes. Yeah. So you invest in what you want right now. No one is going to be more interested in your country than you are. And whatever your business may be, whatever industry it is, you can collaborate and you can make it a success. You focus on it because success comes from minding your business.
Yeah, because right now, IMF endorse Guyana. So go ahead, do it, invest.
Do it now. Do it now. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and I will see you Wednesday night for the reception.
Thank you very much.
The content on Minding Your Business is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as specific legal advice. This show discusses general legal issues affecting business owners. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily that of the show. If you need assistance with your specific legal issue, please consult with a licensed attorney.